They got me back home by calling in tears, claiming Dad had a heart attack. I dropped everything and rushed there, only to walk into an ambush, a stack of documents waiting for my signature to drain me dry. I pretended to go along, just long enough to drop a truth bomb that left the room frozen. You should have seen the look on their faces. Hey Reddit, I was 3 time zones away, just wrapping up a business meeting when my phone started blowing up. First it was Mom, then my sister, then even my uncle. Call after call, one right after the other. When I finally answered, all I could hear was Mom sobbing uncontrollably, so loud I couldn't make out a word. My sister grabbed the phone, her voice shaking as she cried that Dad had suffered a heart attack. She begged me to come home immediately. My heart dropped. I didn't pause to think. My hands were shaking as I booked the first red-eye flight out. Now, Dad and I haven't always seen eye to eye, but he's still my father. And if something had happened to him and I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself. So I dropped everything, my work, my clients, a major deal I'd been grinding on for months, and flew back to the house I grew up in, a place that hadn't really felt like home in a long time. But when I landed, there wasn't an ambulance in sight. No hospital updates. No worried doctors. Just my cousin Ethan waiting at the terminal, surprisingly upbeat for someone caught up in a supposed family emergency. When I asked how Dad was doing, he hesitated before saying he's at home, resting. The doctors said it wasn't a full heart attack, more of a warning sign. But he's okay. His words said one thing, but his eyes didn't match. There was a look, something in the way he kept stealing glances at me, that made the hairs on my neck stand up. It felt off. Every instinct I had was screaming that something wasn't right. But I blamed it on jet lag, on stress. I told myself I was overthinking it. I mean, no way my own family would fake something like this, right? I couldn't have been more wrong. I walked through that front door expecting to see Dad pale and weak, hooked up to monitors, maybe giving me a shaky smile. Instead, I found the entire family sitting around the dining room table. Mom, Dad, my sister, Uncle, even the family lawyer. And in the middle of the table? A thick stack of paperwork. Dad didn't look like someone who just had a health scare. He didn't look great, sure, but he was upright, alert, and when he saw me, he just nodded and said, "There he is." "Took you long enough?" I froze in the doorway, heart pounding. What the hell was going on? They started talking fast. Too fast. Words like inheritance, the business, and debt flew across the table. They spun it like they were desperate. The company was crumbling. Dad's scare made them realize things needed to be set right. It'd only be temporary, they said. Just some paperwork. Just a financial transfer for tax reasons. I could help just by signing a few documents. The lawyer, clearly playing on their team, slid the papers across to me like this was just another Tuesday. But nothing about it felt normal. It was a trap. They weren't asking for support, they were asking me to sign away nearly everything I'd built over the last decade. My condo. My investments. My equity in my tech company. All of it wrapped up in neat little legalese, pretending to be about family. I took one glance and saw the truth. If I signed, I'd lose control of everything. The moment my assets got tied up with theirs, I'd be finished. If they defaulted, and let's be honest, I'd be the one left holding the bag. This wasn't about Dad. It never was. This was about bleeding dry, the only one of us who made it out. The one who didn't go down with the sinking ship. Me. My family and I have always had a rocky relationship. I was the odd one out, the kid who wanted something different. Who didn't buy into the family business. Who moved out early and chased tech instead of tradition. They never really celebrated my wins. It was always a weird mix of jealousy and judgment. I didn't settle down young like my sister. Didn't follow the script. I built my own life. Stable. Solid. Successful. And now here they were, those same voices that once mocked me, grinning like we were the Brady Bunch. Like the past didn't happen. Like we were suddenly close. Like this wasn't just one big guilt trip wrapped in manipulation. I noticed Mom wasn't crying anymore. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. My sister kept chirping over me, offering snacks, cracking jokes, trying to fill the air with something light and normal. But nothing about this was normal. This wasn't panic. It was precision. They'd planned it all out. They knew I'd come running. They counted on it. Every word, every look, it felt like a stage play, and everyone had their role. Uncle played the voice of reason. Mom pulled the emotional strings. My sister kept it casual, like nothing serious was going on. Even the lawyer had rehearsed his lines, nodding at just the right moments to sell the illusion. But what they didn't count on. I've faced boardrooms full of sharks. CEOs who'd sell their own blood for a bump in quarterly earnings. This wasn't a family emergency. It was a full-blown corporate hit job dressed up like a group hug. I gave them a smile, picked up the pen, and acted like I was signing. You could practically hear the collective exhale around the table. My sister even clapped her hands together and said, "See? That wasn't so bad, was it?" I leaned back in my chair, staying quiet, just letting my eyes drift across each of their faces. Then, just as calm as could be, I slid the papers back across the table toward the lawyer and said, "Oh, and by the way, none of those signatures are real. You might want to double-check before filing anything." You could have heard a pin drop. The kind of silence that buzzes in your ears and makes the air feel heavy. Mom's expression collapsed like a mask falling off. My sister turned bright red. Dad finally locked eyes with me, and what I saw there wasn't remorse or regret. It was pure rage. Not because he was sorry. Because I hadn't taken the bait. I stood up slowly and headed toward the front door. But just before I stepped out, I turned back and let loose the words I'd been holding in ever since I realized this was all just a performance. I flew across the damn country thinking my dad was dying. You used the love I still had for this family to try and rob me blind. Don't ever call me again unless someone's actually dying. Then I paused, looked around one last time, and added, "And next time? Hire better actors." That performance was embarrassing. I reached the door as my uncle called out, "Wait. We can explain it." But I didn't stop. Didn't turn around. I walked out and slammed that door shut behind me. I didn't head back to the hotel either. I drove straight to the bank. Because if they were this desperate, this shameless, then there was a lot more going on behind the scenes than I realized. And the people I'd once trusted with my childhood? They might be planning something even worse. I wasn't about to walk away this time. I needed to find out how deep this betrayal really went. And based on what I saw buried in those documents, I had a gut feeling this wasn't just about draining my bank account. This was war. By the next morning, I was still wired, running on 3 hours of sleep and nothing but adrenaline. I couldn't get the image of my father's face out of my head when I told him I'd faked the signatures. That wasn't a man caught in the heat of a bad moment. That was the face of someone who had mapped out every step, who had planned it for weeks, maybe even months. The fake medical scare. The urgency. The paperwork dressed up in legalese, crafted specifically to shift responsibility off their shoulders. And I started thinking, how many times had they rehearsed it all before I showed up? How long had they been banking on me being naive enough to fall for it? I needed real answers, not more lies. So I skipped breakfast, ignored the flood of missed calls and voicemails, and went straight to the one person who might crack. My cousin Ethan. Now, Ethan isn't some evil mastermind. He's a follower. A tag-along in whatever wild plan the rest of the family cooks up. He's not cruel, just spineless. I found him outside this little cafe near the edge of town, standing in line like it was any other morning. Waiting for his breakfast sandwich, sipping his coffee without a care in the world. The moment he saw me walking toward him, all the color drained from his face. He didn't bolt, didn't lie, but not because he had courage, because he was too clueless to realize how deep he was already buried in this mess. I didn't say a word, just stared at him, arms crossed, while he fumbled with his cup and pretended not to notice the weight of what was coming. Eventually, the pressure cracked him. He spilled everything. Turns out, the family business had been hemorrhaging money for years. Dad had made one bad call after another, some above board, others not even close. A shady warehouse deal gone belly up. A phantom company in Nevada that vanished overnight. A silent partner who'd been quietly draining cash until it was far too late to stop. They had mortgaged practically everything. The house. The lake place. Even the farmland Dad inherited decades ago. All of it was leveraged to the edge. And then came the lawsuit. One I hadn't heard a single word about. A former employee filed a whistleblower claim alleging tax fraud and cooked books. The company was under investigation. And if the case went south, which it would, they'd lose everything. Worse? Criminal charges were on the table. That's why they needed my assets. Not for the company. Not to save some legacy. To save themselves. To keep their heads above water. To keep the government from freezing what little was left. I walked out of that cafe with my stomach in knots. I just stood there on the sidewalk, staring into space like the ground had dropped out from under me. Everything I grew up around, my family, the business, the house I once dreamed of raising kids in, it was all just gone. Just an illusion propped up by lies and guilt trips. They expected me to hand over everything out of some outdated sense of loyalty. Because we shared DNA. Because family. But the moment they turned my love for them into a weapon, used it like a crowbar to pry open my bank account, they stopped being my family. That was the moment I realized exactly what I had to do. I needed to burn it all to the ground. So I drove straight to my lawyer. Not just any lawyer. The one I've worked with for years. The one who knows my business inside and out. Tough. Brilliant. And when it counts, absolutely ruthless. I told him everything. From the moment I stepped off the plane to the second I saw those papers. Every manipulation. Every lie. And most importantly, every sign of fraud. The whole thing, the fake health scare, the staged panic laid out for my lawyer. She listened carefully, didn't even blink. Then she told me something that flipped the whole situation on its head. If they forged my signature or even attempted to pass off one version of those documents as legit, it could count as fraud. And if they tried to use those papers in any financial deal, that would open the door to a formal investigation. Maybe even criminal charges. She asked me if I had copies. I handed them over without a word. She nodded and said she'd take it from there. Her advice? Stay quiet. Keep my head down. Watch how it plays out. So that's exactly what I did. 2 weeks passed. Then my phone rang. Same lawyer. Calm voice. Just one sentence. They used the papers. They'd submitted the documents to a private lender, trying to secure funds, claiming they had my full approval behind the deal. But the lender wasn't stupid. They ran a verification check. That's when everything unraveled. They spotted the forged signature. They traced the inconsistencies in the filing trail. And they found just enough to freeze the entire transaction and flag it to the authorities. Turns out my family's desperation had finally crossed a legal line. And this time it was all on record. No more speculation. No more guessing. Just cold, hard proof. I didn't throw a party. I didn't rub it in anyone's face. But I did pay one final visit to their house. Not to yell. Not to fight. Just to say what needed to be said. When they opened the door, you'd think they'd seen a ghost. I walked in and told them everything. That I knew about the debt. The lawsuit. The fraud. The betrayal. That every last piece of it had come to light. And the investigation? Already underway. I told them the only reason I hadn't filed my own charges was because I wanted to move forward clean, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. I was cutting every tie. Permanently. I said I was revising my will, locking down every account, and putting safeguards on any asset that had even the faintest connection to the family name. And I warned them if I ever heard from them again or saw another attempt to rope me in, I'd go public with everything. Mom started crying. My sister begged me not to go through with it. Dad said nothing. Just stared at me like I'd shattered something sacred. Maybe I did. But it wasn't love I destroyed. It was the illusion that they still had control over me. That day, I stopped being their backup plan. I stopped being their safety net. Their golden goose. I became the consequence they thought would never come. And then I walked out that door for good. Since then, life's been a lot quieter. Not easier, but cleaner. Letting go of your own blood, even when it's poisoned, feels like losing a part of yourself you always assumed you'd need. It hurts. Especially around the holidays. But you know what doesn't hurt anymore? My peace of mind. My finances. My mornings where I don't wake up dreading what manipulation might come next. Every now and then, I still hear things. Gossip from old neighbors. Whispers from distant relatives. The business? Gone. The lawsuit? Still crawling through the courts. My sister's crashing on a friend's couch. My parents had to sell the house. None of it shocks me. They built their empire on lies and thought I'd be the one to keep it standing. But I'm done carrying things that were never mine to hold. At the end of the day, family isn't just about shared blood. It's about respect. About trust. About love that doesn't come with strings attached. And when you finally understand that, you stop chasing ghosts and houses that never felt like home. You start building something that actually belongs to you. And for the first time in a long time, you get to live for yourself.